Hello everyone and welcome back to Panik Peak. Let me know where you are listening from in the world by leaving a comment, and if you like the episode, please like and subscribe. Now, let's get cozy, and let's begin. I had never been one for dating apps. The thought of sharing my personal details, my likes, my dislikes, just to meet someone online, it seemed unnatural, invasive. So when I started getting notifications from an app I'd never signed up for, I thought it was a mistake. A pop-up, a scam, or maybe a random ad designed to get my attention. But it didn't stop there. The notifications kept coming. Each day, without fail, a new message would ping on my phone, enticing me to check it out. At first, I ignored them, hoping they'd eventually stop. But they didn't. Asterisk, it's a match. Asterisk, asterisk, someone's interested in you. Asterisk, asterisk, start a conversation with John. Asterisk, I didn't know who John was. I didn't know how this app had found me. But what unnerved me the most was how much it seemed to know. It wasn't just a random name or a generic message. It was personal. My name, my schedule, the places I frequented. It felt invasive, but it also felt wrong. And then the messages started to change. At first, they were just notifications, little reminders. But soon, they became something else entirely. Something darker. Something that wouldn't let me forget it. The algorithm's obsession. At first, I thought it was just another glitch. A wrong number, a mistake, or a weird advertisement that slipped through the cracks. I had never signed up for the dating app, but the notifications kept coming. Asterisk, it's a match. Asterisk, asterisk, someone's interested in you. Asterisk, asterisk, start a conversation with John. Asterisk, I couldn't even remember when the first one had arrived. My phone had been buzzing incessantly, each ping a sharp reminder that I'd missed something important, some kind of sign-up or agreement I must have made without realizing it. The app seemed harmless at first, simple and generic. The interface was sleek, minimal. But there was something unnerving about the precision of the data it had. The first time I checked it out of curiosity, I was stunned. It knew my name. It knew my favorite coffee shop. It even knew the exact hours I worked at the office. I brushed it off as one of those creepy, well-targeted apps that track your digital footprint. But the messages kept coming. Each one more personal than the last. Asterisk, I know you're getting off work at 5 p.m. today. Asterisk, asterisk, you'll be at the park around 6 p.m. I'll see you there. Asterisk, I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? Maybe I was just paranoid, imagining things. But then the messages grew darker. Asterisk, you're walking down the alley. I can hear your footsteps. Asterisk, asterisk, you're alone, aren't you? Asterisk. My heart pounded as I stood frozen in my kitchen, reading the message. How could it know? I hadn't told anyone I was walking through the alley. I hadn't even looked at my phone for the past few minutes. I felt a chill run down my spine. My phone buzzed again, this time with a new notification. Asterisk, you're about to turn the corner, aren't you? I'll be waiting. Asterisk. I was starting to feel like I was losing control of my own life. The app didn't just know where I was, it seemed to be predicting my every move. At first, I tried to convince myself it was all just coincidence. The app could have accessed my location through GPS or some other means, right? I turned off my location services, hoping that would stop it. But the messages didn't stop. They kept coming, more frequent and more precise. Asterisk, I see you in your kitchen now, standing by the counter. You're making tea, aren't you? Asterisk. The messages were so specific now that I began to wonder if someone was spying on me. I didn't know how, but I felt like I was being watched every moment of the day. I tried to shake it off, thinking I was just being paranoid. But then the next message came through, and my blood ran cold. Asterisk, I'm already inside your house. Asterisk. My stomach twisted. I quickly bolted the door and ran to the window. There was no one outside, no sign of anything unusual. But the message, it felt real. Too real. I locked every window and door. I sat in the corner of my living room, holding my phone, praying for the messages to stop. But they didn't. Asterisk, you're in the living room now. I see you sitting on the couch. I can hear your breathing. Asterisk. I couldn't breathe. The room felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in on me. The phone in my hand shook violently. My thoughts raced, but there was no logical explanation. No way to stop this. I searched for a way to delete the app, to remove myself from whatever digital nightmare I was trapped in. But every time I tried to open the app, it froze. The screen was black, and I couldn't escape. That's when I heard the sound. It was faint at first, just a click, like a door unlocking. I froze, staring at my phone as it buzzed again. Asterisk, I'm here. Don't run. I'll find you wherever you go. Asterisk. The fear hit me like a wave. I didn't know if it was real, but I knew it didn't matter anymore. The algorithm had taken control, and now it was part of me. Part of everything I did. I ran into the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I checked the app again, desperate to see if there was anything I could do to stop it. But there was only one message waiting. Asterisk, I see you in the bathroom, staring at your phone. You're not safe here. You never were. Asterisk. I backed away from the door, terrified, as my phone buzzed again. Asterisk, knock. Knock. Knock, asterisk. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. The sound was unmistakable. It was coming from the bathroom door. Asterisk, I'm inside your head. There's nowhere left to hide. Asterisk. I gripped the edge of the sink, my hands slick with sweat. The door rattled. The app's notifications filled the screen, one after another, each more cryptic, more chilling than the last. Suddenly, the phone buzzed with one final message. Asterisk, I'm coming inside. Asterisk. The last sound I heard before the door began to creak open was the soft, familiar buzz of my phone, signaling the next message. And I knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that I would never escape. When the door finally swung open, there was no one there. Just empty air. The app was silent now. No more pings, no more messages. For a moment, it was like nothing had happened. But the silence was worse than any of the messages. I looked down at my phone, my trembling fingers still clutched around it. The screen was blank. The app was gone. But I wasn't free. There was a new notification. It didn't come from the app. It came from my email. Asterisk, I know you're reading this. I'm still here. Asterisk. I didn't need to look over my shoulder to know it was true. The algorithm hadn't just invaded my phone, it had embedded itself in every part of me. The obsession had taken root, and now it was following me, haunting me, wherever I went. No matter where I ran, no matter how far I tried to escape, asterisk, it was already there, asterisk. I've always been a sucker for romance. The anticipation of a perfect night out, the butterflies before meeting someone new, it's exciting. So when I met him, everything seemed like it was straight out of a movie. His charm was effortless, his smile warm and genuine. We talked for hours online before agreeing to meet in person, and when he suggested a new, upscale restaurant in town, I couldn't resist. The kind of place with dim lights, fine wine, and an air of mystery hanging around it. When he picked me up in his sleek black car, I was already smiling, excited for the evening ahead. He was everything I wanted. Everything I'd imagined. And when we arrived at the restaurant, a trendy little gem that had just opened, it seemed like fate had brought us together. But as soon as we walked inside, I should have known something wasn't right. The way the host looked at us, his smile too tight, like he knew something I didn't. The strange quiet hum in the air, the restaurant seemed almost too quiet. The soft, melodic jazz playing from the speakers, the flickering candlelight on each table, the way the staff moved in unison, their expressions cold and professional. I brushed it all aside, though. Maybe it was just nerves. After all, it was our first date. I told myself to relax, and I did. He led me to a corner booth, tucked away from the rest of the diners. It was an intimate spot, far from prying eyes, with only one other table occupied. The velvet chairs were plush, the tables set with fine china, silverware that gleamed in the soft light. He looked around, giving me a grin that made me feel both comfortable and yet strangely uneasy at the same time. But I couldn't place why. "I've been waiting to try this place," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "They say the chef here is incredible. Trust me, we'll have an unforgettable meal." It was hard not to smile back. There was something about him, his presence, that made me feel safe. Secure. I settled in, hoping the night would unfold like a fairy tale. The waiter appeared almost instantly, as if on cue. He was dressed in a crisp black suit, his movements sharp and precise. He looked at my date, and then at me, waiting for our orders. But my date didn't give me a chance to speak. "Don't worry about the menu," he said with that signature grin. "I've heard this place has the best chef, so I'll order for us. Trust me." I felt a little strange, but the charm in his voice was irresistible. It was easy to let go of the control and just let him take care of it. I nodded, and the waiter left, seemingly disappearing into the shadows of the restaurant. I glanced around the room, noticing the other diners, but I didn't see anyone who looked particularly out of place. A couple sat across from us, deep in conversation, their faces obscured by the flickering candlelight. The atmosphere was almost dreamlike, everything too perfect, too polished. It wasn't long before our food arrived. The waiter placed the plates down with an air of quiet ceremony, as if we were part of some grand performance. My dish was a delicate arrangement of meat and vegetables, the colors so vivid they looked almost painted. But something felt wrong. There was something off in the air, a faint chill creeping into the warm, elegant space. My gaze shifted to the plate. Beneath the carefully arranged garnishes, something caught my eye, a small, folded note. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't sure if I'd imagined it, but I could have sworn the waiter had placed it there deliberately. The note was folded neatly in half, as if it had been tucked into the dish like an afterthought. I stared at it for a moment, trying to convince myself it was just a mistake. Maybe it was a miscommunication, or some strange part of the meal's presentation. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I unfolded it. The handwriting was scrawled in a hurried, almost frantic manner. "Help me. You're next." I froze. The world around me seemed to blur, the sounds of the restaurant fading into a low hum, almost like static. My breath caught in my throat. Who had written this? Why was it on my plate? My hands shook, and I quickly folded the note back up, tucking it into my pocket before my date could notice. But it was too late. He was looking at me now, his eyes sharp and focused, studying me in a way that made my stomach twist. There was no trace of the warmth he had shown earlier, no hint of concern in his gaze. It was as if he knew something I didn't. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. I couldn't answer right away. I was too afraid to speak, my mouth dry. I glanced at my food, wondering if it had anything to do with the note. But how could it? The meal looked perfect. Too perfect. The note, however, made my blood run cold. I don't feel well," I said finally, my voice unsteady. I wanted to stand, to run, but my legs felt like lead. "Maybe some air." He leaned forward slightly, his hand brushing against mine, the touch deliberate but gentle. His smile was smooth, like it had been rehearsed 100 times, but there was something behind it that made me want to scream. "You're fine," he said, his voice unwavering. "I'm sure it's just nerves." "You're nervous, aren't you?" I nodded quickly, but inside, a wave of panic was rising. His calmness was suffocating. The way he knew I was nervous, the way he seemed to know everything about me, it wasn't right. I tried to shake the feeling off, but the unease only grew. The waiter returned then, a bottle of wine in hand. He poured it into my glass without a word, but his eyes lingered on me, too long, too intensely. It wasn't normal. My date lifted his glass, catching my eye. His smile was softer now, almost reassuring. "To us," he said, his voice smooth, like honey. "To the beginning of something unforgettable." I didn't know what to say. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this out of control, this helpless. There was something happening here that I couldn't explain, something much darker than I wanted to admit. I forced a smile, clinking my glass against his, and took a sip. The wine was rich and smooth, but it did nothing to ease the tightness in my chest. As we ate in silence, I tried to push the note from my mind, to pretend like everything was fine. But with every bite, with every glance he cast in my direction, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. That I was being studied. And that note, those words, echoed in my mind, louder with every passing second. Then, as if on cue, I saw it, a figure at the entrance of the restaurant. A woman, her face hidden beneath the hood of her coat. She didn't belong here. There was something about the way she moved, her steps too deliberate, her eyes scanning the room. She locked eyes with me. And then, she smiled. But it wasn't a smile of recognition. It was a warning. A warning that sent a chill down my spine. I turned back to my date, trying to hide my panic. But he was already watching me, his smile now a little too wide, his eyes too focused. "You saw her, didn't you?" he asked, his voice low. There was no question in it, only certainty. Before I could respond, he continued, his words dripping with something darker. "You're not leaving this place until it's done. Until I'm finished." The world seemed to tilt. The walls closed in around me. The air thickened, and I realized, with a sickening lurch in my stomach, that I was trapped. The dinner, the date, it had all been part of the plan. The note wasn't a warning. It was a promise. I was next. And there was no escape. The walls of the restaurant seemed to close in around me, as though the space itself was shrinking, constricting. My heart raced, my breath shallow, and the oppressive weight of his gaze felt like a physical force pressing down on me. I wanted to scream, to run, to break free from this nightmare, but I couldn't move. It was as if the very air had been thickened, and every fiber of my being screamed at me to stay still, to comply. "Why?" I managed to whisper, my voice barely a tremor, my throat tight. Why me? What do you want? His smile didn't falter, but there was something new in his eyes, a flicker of something almost excited. Hungry. You've always known something was missing in your life, he said, his voice calm, almost affectionate. You're empty inside, just like the rest of them. All of you, searching for meaning, for purpose. And I'm here to show you that purpose. To give you a role in something greater. He leaned forward, the gleam in his eyes unsettling, the air around him vibrating with a quiet energy. You should be grateful. It's an honor, really. The room spun. The wine I'd drunken felt like poison now. My thoughts were clouded, the weight of the situation bearing down on me like an avalanche. This wasn't a date. This wasn't a romantic evening gone wrong. I had walked into a trap, a meticulously planned, coldly calculated trap, and I had no way of escaping it. Before I could gather the strength to move, to say anything, the figure by the door, who had been watching us, slipped through the crowd, her face now visible. It was a woman, pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes. She was one of them. Another piece of the puzzle, I realized too late. The smile she gave me was the same one my date wore, a predator's grin. He's right, you know, she said, her voice distant, hollow. There is no escaping now. Panic flooded my chest, my limbs going numb as the weight of her words settled in. I looked around, but the room felt like a stage, with me as the unwilling actor. The staff moved like shadows now, too synchronized, too perfect. Every detail, every movement, had been orchestrated for this moment. They were waiting for something, waiting for me to understand. I tried to rise from the table, but my legs wouldn't obey. My mind screamed at me to run, to flee from this nightmare, but my body was paralyzed by an unseen force. The date, he wasn't just a man. He was the orchestrator, the master of this twisted game, and I had been nothing more than a pawn, a mere player in a sick, predestined ritual. Don't worry, he said, standing up now, his voice low and soothing as he came closer. It'll be over soon. You'll understand everything. The hunger, the need, it's all part of the plan. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. The woman stepped closer, her hand reaching for me. Her touch was icy, unnatural. And then, the moment I feared most came, the truth. I was never meant to leave. No one ever was. The restaurant wasn't a restaurant at all. It was a holding ground. A place where lives were used, consumed, for a purpose I couldn't yet understand. The people in the room, the staff, even the other diners, they were all part of it. This had been set in motion long before I ever stepped foot inside. As his hand came to rest on my shoulder, his smile wide and triumphant, I felt a sharp, cold realization gnaw at my insides. I was the next offering. And this was no longer a dinner. It was the end of me. I had always believed in love at first sight, or at least, I had always hoped for it. That night, on our first date, it seemed like it was finally happening. His smile was perfect, his laugh contagious, and we spoke for hours, as though we had known each other for years. It was everything I had imagined, romantic, thrilling, and almost too good to be true. When the evening ended, he walked me to my door with a gentle kiss on the cheek and the promise of a second date. I couldn't stop smiling as I stepped inside, replaying every moment in my head. I felt like I was floating, like the universe had finally conspired to give me exactly what I wanted. But when I woke up the next morning, I felt different. And that difference wasn't just in my head. It was in my body. I woke up with a strange feeling, like I hadn't fully slept. The sunlight seeping through the blinds felt too warm, too bright. My limbs felt heavy, like they were made of lead. Something about the morning felt wrong. I slowly opened my eyes, trying to shake off the odd sensation. As I shifted, I noticed that the sheets were too soft, too smooth. I wasn't used to this texture. Confused, I reached up to rub my eyes and froze. The hands in front of me weren't mine. They were long, slender, with perfectly manicured nails. I jerked back and sat up in a panic, glancing down at the body I was in. A body I didn't recognize. My skin was different, paler, smoother, almost porcelain-like. I felt a pulse of dread crawl up my spine. What the hell was happening? I scrambled to my feet, my stomach twisting. There was a lingering scent of cologne in the air. His cologne. My mind flashed to the night before, the date. The dinner. The laughter. The moment when I'd let myself relax and trust him. He was perfect, charming, funny, everything I wanted. No. No, this couldn't be real. It was a nightmare. I stumbled into the bathroom, my heart hammering in my chest. My reflection in the mirror made my blood run cold. It wasn't me. I was staring at a woman I didn't recognize, my features altered into something foreign. My eyes, her eyes, were wide with horror. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I touched the cool surface of the mirror, expecting to wake up any second, but nothing changed. I spun around, panic clawing at my throat. I had to get out of here. I had to figure this out. That's when I heard it. A faint, gurgling sound. My heart stopped. I turned, and my stomach flipped as I saw the bed. There, lying motionless, was my body. The person I had been just hours ago. But something was wrong. So wrong. My old body, the one I had woken up in the morning before, wasn't breathing. I couldn't breathe. I stumbled back, my hand pressing against my mouth as the reality of it hit me. How? How had this happened? My mind raced as I tried to piece together the night. Dinner. Wine. Laughter. But there was a moment I couldn't quite remember. A moment where things started to feel hazy. The conversation had drifted into something deeper, almost hypnotic. I'd felt dizzy, my thoughts spinning. And then, nothing. I hadn't just woken up in a different body. My body was gone. I rushed to the bed, desperate to check for a pulse, but as I reached out, my hand recoiled in horror. The body, my body, was cold. Rigor mortis was already setting in, stiffening the limbs. The eyes were wide open, frozen in a silent scream. My mouth trembled as I backed away, the reality of what had happened crashing over me in waves. He had done this. The man I had trusted. The man I had allowed myself to fall for. I didn't know what he was. But I was starting to realize, it didn't matter. Because I wasn't going to survive this. I felt the cold touch of his hand on my shoulder, and I screamed. "Did you really think you were the first?" he whispered, his voice low and familiar, like a memory I didn't want to recall. I spun around, barely able to process what I was seeing. He was standing there, smiling like he hadn't just taken everything from me. His eyes glimmered with that same dark allure from the night before, but now there was something colder, something darker lurking behind them. The sweet man I had met was gone. In his place was something predatory. "I knew from the moment I saw you, you would be perfect," he continued, his voice too smooth, too calm. "There was something about you, something I couldn't resist. Your beauty, your spirit, it's always so refreshing. So rare." I recoiled, my knees buckling beneath me as I backed into the wall. "What the hell are you talking about?" He stepped closer, the scent of his cologne wrapping around me like a poison. "You don't know, do you? You don't realize the gift I gave you." "A gift?" I shook my head, my thoughts racing. What gift? He was the one who had taken everything from me. "What did you do to me?" I whispered, my voice shaking with fear. He smiled, and it sent a shiver down my spine. "I did what I do best. I took what I wanted." You took my body." My voice broke as the realization hit me. He nodded slowly, his smile widening. "Yes. And now, you're going to live the rest of your life in mine." I felt bile rise in my throat. My body was still in the bed, lifeless, cold. But somehow, the worst part was that I was now trapped. Trapped in a body that wasn't mine, with a future that had been stolen. His hand reached out again, this time resting on my cheek. It was cold, and I flinched away from it. "You see, I've done this before," he continued. "I've had countless first dates. And the outcome is always the same. I take what I need, and when I'm done, I move on." My mind raced. He had done this to others, hadn't he? He wasn't just some charming guy on a first date. He was a predator, a parasite who fed on the lives of those foolish enough to trust him. Tears streamed down my face as I realized the full scope of what he had done. "There's no escaping this," he whispered, leaning in closer. "You belong to me now." I felt a cold, sickening weight in my chest as the last sliver of hope I had ever clung to was crushed beneath the weight of his words. This wasn't just a nightmare. It was my new reality. The man I had fallen for, the man I had trusted, wasn't a man at all. And I would never escape him. Because once he had you, there was no leaving. No escape. No hope. And as he stood there, watching me with those predatory eyes, I realized that my first date had, in fact, been my last. I sit here now, trapped in this foreign skin. I've tried to scream, tried to fight it, but it's useless. There's no one to hear me. No one to save me. The world outside is the same, but everything feels different, wrong star. He's gone, blending in with the countless others he's stolen from. My mind is fading, my own memories slipping away as he promised they would. Soon, I will be nothing but a shadow, a forgotten face in the crowd. But the worst part is that I'm not the first. And I won't be the last. Because once you let him in, you're already lost. It started like any other Friday night. I was excited, a little nervous, but mostly hopeful. I'd spent the last few weeks swiping through dating apps, half-heartedly chatting with strangers, and then finally stumbling upon Michael's profile. He was different. He was handsome, no, stunning. Tall, dark-haired, and the kind of smile that could make anyone feel like the center of his world. His bio was charming, witty, everything seemed too perfect, but it didn't matter. I was ready for a change, ready for something real. We talked for a few days, exchanging messages and plans, until we finally settled on meeting at a cozy cafe. It felt like a fresh start. I was nervous, of course, but who wasn't on a first date? I arrived early, checking my phone for a text or notification. My heart skipped when I saw a message from him, "I'm almost there. Can't wait to meet you." I smiled, feeling a rush of excitement. But then I looked up, and there he was. I had prepared myself for someone who looked almost like his pictures, maybe not quite as polished, but still a decent match. But the man walking toward me was off. Something was wrong. Something felt twisted. He had the same height, the same confident walk, but his face wasn't the same. The warmth I expected from his smile wasn't there. And the more I looked at him, the more the feeling of dread seeped in. He paused just in front of me, his eyes scanning my face for a moment longer than I felt comfortable with. The smile he gave me didn't reach his eyes. It was too wide, too calculated. A part of me wanted to run, but my legs felt frozen, like they couldn't decide whether to stay or flee. "Hey," he said softly, his voice warm but with an undercurrent of something dark. "You must be Emma." "Yeah, I'm Emma." I managed to speak, though my throat felt dry. He extended his hand, and I shook it, trying to ignore the coldness that seemed to seep from his skin. His grip was firm, but there was something unnerving about how long he held onto my hand, like he was savoring it, feeling it. "Nice to finally meet you," he continued, his smile widening. "I've been looking forward to this." I smiled back, but it didn't feel real. Something about his presence unsettled me, like I was a piece in a game I didn't understand. I quickly glanced around, hoping for some sign that this was all a misunderstanding, that the Real Michael would walk in any second. But no one else seemed to notice how strange the situation had become. The other cafe patrons were absorbed in their own conversations, oblivious to the tension in the air. "Would you like to sit?" I offered, trying to force some normalcy into the moment. "Sure," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. We made our way to a table by the window, where the dim light cast eerie shadows across his face. I sat down first, but he didn't sit immediately. Instead, he hovered over me for a moment, like he was studying me. I couldn't help but feel like prey, exposed, under his gaze. He finally sat down across from me, folding his hands together on the table. "So, how was your week?" he asked, his voice smooth, as though we were already old friends. But it didn't feel natural. It felt rehearsed. I hesitated, forcing myself to take a deep breath. "It was okay. Busy, you know. Work, errands, the usual. And you?" "Same here. But tonight, it's all about us." His smile grew again, but it looked too wide, too stretched. There was something about the way he spoke that made my heart race faster. Every word felt like it carried an invisible weight, like it was layered with something I couldn't understand. I tried to focus on anything else, anything but the feeling that was growing inside me. But the more I looked at him, the more his face seemed wrong. "You don't look like your pictures," I blurted out before I could stop myself. I immediately regretted the words, but they had slipped out. His face fell slightly, his eyes narrowing. A brief flash of irritation flickered, then disappeared, replaced by that same unsettling smile. "Yeah," he said softly, almost as if he were talking to himself. "I had to borrow this face." I blinked, unsure if I had heard him correctly. "What?" His smile grew wider, his teeth gleaming. "The last one, well, they didn't survive." A cold shiver ran through me, and I could feel the blood draining from my face. I laughed nervously, but it came out more like a strangled cough. "You're kidding, right?" I said, trying to brush it off, but my hands were already trembling under the table. But he didn't laugh with me. Instead, his expression remained eerily calm, even satisfied. "No, Emma. I'm not kidding. The last one didn't survive. I needed a new face. A better one." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I found this one. It's perfect, don't you think?" I felt my stomach twist in horror as I recoiled slightly. His eyes, once dark and warm, now looked empty, void of anything human. I could feel the presence of something else, something dark and hungry, in the space between us. My heart pounded in my chest, and a sudden wave of nausea rolled over me. "What are you talking about?" My voice barely came out, a strangled whisper. He leaned back in his chair, looking at me with something like amusement. I had to find the right fit. You know, faces are tricky. They don't always work out. But I think this one will do. It's strong. Resilient. His words were like poison, seeping into my thoughts, making my skin crawl. I needed to leave. Now. I stood up quickly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice shaking with panic. "This isn't funny anymore." But before I could take a step toward the door, his hand shot out, grabbing my wrist with a grip so tight, it almost felt like it was crushing my bones. I gasped in pain, trying to pull away, but his hold was unyielding. "Don't run," he said, his voice unnervingly calm. "You wouldn't want to see the other faces I've borrowed. They never stay for long." I tugged harder, desperation flooding my veins, but his hand didn't budge. My heart pounded in my ears, and I could feel the cold sweat forming on my skin. "Let go of me!" I screamed, but no one seemed to hear. The cafe was empty now, eerily silent, except for us. The air was thick, suffocating. "You can't escape," he whispered, leaning in close, his breath cold against my ear. "Not from me. I always find the perfect match." His words were like a knife, cutting into my mind, and I realized with a sickening certainty that I wasn't dealing with a man. I wasn't even dealing with something human. This thing had been taking faces for God knows how long. And now, I was the next one. The next victim. I tried to scream again, but it was no use. My body felt frozen, my limbs unable to move. I could only stare at him as he tilted his head, a twisted, almost sadistic smile playing on his lips. And then, in the darkness of the cafe, I realized there was no way out. I was his next face. And once I was gone, there would be no one left to remember. No one left to stop him. The darkness around us seemed to deepen, swallowing the last vestiges of light in the cafe. My pulse hammered in my ears, and every instinct told me to run, to scream, to fight, but my body betrayed me. I was paralyzed, trapped in his gaze, frozen in place by something far worse than fear, the terrifying certainty that I was no longer in control of my own fate. His grip on my wrist tightened, and he leaned in closer, his face now inches from mine. The smell of decay lingered in the air, as though the mask of a man had been worn far too long. I could feel his breath on my skin, cold and damp, like it wasn't even coming from him anymore. It felt wrong. All of it felt wrong. "You see," he whispered, his voice low and uncomfortably soft, "it's so easy to take what isn't yours. Faces are just flesh. You can have as many as you need. You'll be perfect, Emma. You'll fit so nicely." The words were like a curse, wrapping around my mind, tightening like a noose. And then, as if sensing my despair, his smile widened further, impossibly wide. My vision began to blur, the room tilting around me as dizziness set in. I could feel myself slipping, my consciousness starting to fade like a dream just before you wake up. And in that moment, something shifted. Without warning, my body seemed to break free from its paralysis. My heart surged with adrenaline, pumping life back into my limbs. With every ounce of strength I had left, I twisted violently in his grip, slamming my knee into his abdomen. The shock of pain made him loosen his hold, just enough for me to yank my arm away. I stumbled backward, gasping for breath, my heart racing as I darted toward the door. But as my hand touched the handle, I heard his voice behind me, a low murmur that chilled me to the bone. "I'll find you again, Emma," he said, his voice trailing off into the silence. "You can't hide from me." I threw the door open and bolted into the night, my legs barely carrying me through the dark streets, my mind screaming to get as far away as possible. I didn't stop running, not until the city lights were far behind me, until my legs felt like jelly and my breath was ragged. When I finally collapsed into the safety of my apartment, I locked every door, every window. My body trembled uncontrollably as I sat on the floor, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was it a nightmare? A sick joke? But deep down, I knew better. The fear that gnawed at me wouldn't go away. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was out there, watching me. And I knew something far worse than my terror had settled in my chest, the undeniable truth that I was never going to be free of him. Faces could change. But some nightmares never ended. It had been a long day. One of those days where the hours dragged, and the weight of deadlines and responsibilities piled on until I could barely keep my eyes open. It was Valentine's Day, and I had plans to unwind with a glass of wine and a good book, just me, myself, and my thoughts. The idea of an evening alone, while not ideal, seemed like a necessary escape from the chaos that had consumed the past few weeks. As I pulled into my driveway, I was surprised to see a package waiting for me on the doorstep. The sunlight was fading, casting long shadows across the front yard. At first, I assumed it was just a delivery that had arrived earlier than expected. Maybe something I'd forgotten about, or perhaps a late gift. But there was something odd about the package. It wasn't the typical brown box from an online retailer. No, this one was different. A single thought pierced through the exhaustion clouding my mind: who could it be from? But as I took a step closer, the knot that tightened in my chest had nothing to do with curiosity. It had everything to do with fear. The box was simple, brown cardboard, but it was wrapped in thick twine, the kind that would have made it look like a gift from another time, if not for the unmistakable sensation crawling up my spine. It wasn't just the packaging that unnerved me. It was the subtle way it glowed in the fading light. I stepped closer, my shoes crunching against the cold gravel of the driveway. I reached for the box, the warmth of it seeping through the cardboard like a hidden flame. My fingers brushed the edges, and something inside, the tiniest, most imperceptible thrum, made my skin prickle. I paused, hands suspended mid-air. No one had come to the door. No delivery truck, no sound of footsteps, no one calling out from the street. A quick glance around confirmed it: no one was nearby. The neighborhood, usually full of the sounds of children playing or dogs barking, was eerily silent. The street lamps flickered to life, but the shadows that stretched from the trees seemed to grow deeper, darker. I shook off the unease. It's just a package, I told myself. Asterisk, get inside. Open it. Move on, asterisk. But even as I told myself that, I couldn't ignore the gnawing sense of dread growing stronger with each passing second. I picked up the box, the weight of it surprisingly heavy for its size. It was warm, almost too warm, and it seemed to hum, like a heartbeat, steady and strong. I could feel the pulse of it through the cardboard. The feeling crawled up my arm and made my stomach flip. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't know why, but I knew I shouldn't open it. Yet, curiosity, mingled with a growing sense of panic, pushed me forward. I carried it inside, setting it on the hallway table and standing over it. It wasn't until I'd placed the box down that I noticed the note, almost hidden beneath a flap of the twine, like it had been shoved in carelessly. I picked it up, and as soon as my fingers brushed against the paper, a chill ran through me. The handwriting was jagged, uneven, as if it had been written in a hurry. Or perhaps, with something else in mind entirely. I scanned the words, feeling a knot form in my throat. Asterisk be mine. Or be next, asterisk. I froze. The words didn't make sense. My thoughts scrambled, trying to connect them to something, anything, that would explain the insanity of it all. Was it a joke? A Valentine's prank from someone who knew my sense of humor? But no one I knew would send something this disturbing. My body felt numb, and the air grew thick, suffocating. The weight of the package seemed to grow with each passing second, pressing down on me like the walls were closing in. I reached for the box, my hand trembling as I slid the twine off. The thick wrapping came undone too easily, revealing a red heart-shaped box nestled inside, perfectly smooth and glossy, like something you'd see in a romantic movie scene. It gleamed under the hallway light, as if beckoning me closer. But it wasn't the beauty of it that caught my attention, it was the sound. The faintest, rhythmic thumping. I stopped, my heart racing. What the hell? I leaned in closer, holding my breath, trying to convince myself that I was imagining things. But no. There it was again. The unmistakable sound of a heartbeat. It was coming from the box. I backed away instinctively, my mind screaming at me to run, to throw it all away, to never have opened it. But my feet wouldn't move. I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. The heartbeat grew louder, more frantic, as if desperate to be heard. It was impossible, asterisk it couldn't be real star. I stood there, frozen, for what felt like an eternity, until my fingers moved of their own accord. Slowly, reluctantly, I reached for the lid. The moment I lifted it, I almost screamed. Inside the box was a heart. A real, beating heart. The raw, red flesh pulsed with life, blood staining the velvet beneath it, thick and dark like a grotesque mockery of Valentine's Day. My stomach lurched, and I staggered back, dropping the box in horror. The heartbeat seemed to echo around the room, reverberating off the walls like it was mocking me. My breath was shallow, ragged. Asterisk this isn't real. It's a joke. It's not real, asterisk. But there was nothing funny about it. Nothing. I reached for my phone, my hands shaking violently as I dialed 911, hoping that someone, anyone, would tell me this wasn't happening. I could barely hear the line ring over the pounding in my chest, but when the call cut off abruptly, the silence that followed was worse than anything I'd ever heard. My mind raced, asterisk what was going on? Why is this happening, asterisk? Then, a sound. A knock. I spun around, the blood draining from my face. The front door, which had been firmly closed just moments before, was now wide open. The cold draft from outside crept into the room, making the hairs on my arms stand on end. I didn't move, didn't breathe, as I scanned the doorway. There was no one. Just the empty night stretching before me. But then, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and getting closer. Each step echoed like a countdown, growing louder with each passing second. Please, no, my heart raced as I turned to look over my shoulder. There, in the shadows of the hallway, stood a figure. Tall, cloaked in darkness, its presence sending a wave of cold through the room. I couldn't make out its features, but I felt it, asterisk it was watching me star. Then the voice, soft and dangerous. Asterisk, you should have said yes. Asterisk. My pulse hammered in my ears as the figure moved, its silhouette shifting like smoke. A chill swept through my bones, and I stumbled backward, my mind screaming for me to escape, but my legs refused to cooperate. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the shadow. Suddenly, the heartbeat from the box stopped. And then, I felt it. A sharp, agonizing pressure in my chest. I gasped for air, but it didn't help. The darkness seemed to consume me, its grip tightening with each passing second. The shadow stepped forward, and as I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath, I heard it once more. The heartbeat. This time, it wasn't in the box. It was inside me. The pressure in my chest became unbearable, as if a weight was pressing down from the inside, squeezing the life out of me. My hands shot up to my ribs, but it felt as though the heartbeat wasn't just inside my body, it was merging with me. I gasped for air, but the world around me seemed to blur. My vision dimmed, the edges of the room fading into darkness. The shadow moved closer, its form now visible, a figure cloaked in tattered black, its face obscured by shadows, but somehow, I could feel its eyes on me. My mouth opened to scream, but no sound came out. Instead, all I could hear was that pulse, louder now, as if it were the only thing that mattered. "You're mine now," the voice whispered, soft and chilling, as it drifted into the air like a dark promise. I tried to stand, tried to fight, but my legs buckled beneath me. The heartbeat in my chest grew faster, its frantic rhythm matching my racing thoughts. I felt as though I were being pulled into the abyss, the very air turning thick with dread. The darkness around me pressed in tighter, suffocating me. Then, in the corner of my vision, I saw something, an outline. Another figure, this time standing in the doorway. My heart skipped, the thumping in my chest faltering for a split second as the figure stepped into the room. "Help me!" I tried to scream, but again, no words came. The figure took a step forward, but it wasn't a savior. No, it was the same thing, another shadow, another nightmare come to life. The face beneath the cloak now became clearer, and I saw it, a grotesque smile, sharp and cruel, stretching across an empty, hollow face. Asterisk, you could have said yes. Now, you're mine forever. Asterisk. The room closed in around me, the heart inside me now beating in perfect synchronization with the one in the box. I realized, with sickening clarity, that I had no escape. The pulse that once felt alien was now a part of me, bound to me in a way I couldn't comprehend. In one final, desperate thought, I tried to understand what had happened, how this twisted Valentine's curse had found me. But the answer was too late. As the last beat of my own heart echoed in my ears, the darkness swallowed everything, my mind, my soul, and the beating heart that had started it all. And then, silence. Only the steady pulse remained. Asterisk, be mine. Or be next, asterisk. Now, there was no one left to save me,